Alright, so let's do a quick look at complex numbers. It's just an extension of the imaginary numbers. Complex numbers just means that you're going to have something that looks like this. A plus BI. This little piece right here is a complex number because it has a real part, this part, and an imaginary part combined with a real number. So the A and the B are real numbers, and I is your imaginary part. The real part is just the A. I'm just using letters here to represent my numbers. And the imaginary part, or excuse me, the complex part is the BI, because you've got a real number with an imaginary unit attached to it. So when you have that, a real number added to a real number that's got that imaginary unit attached to it, that's where we get a complex number from. So if you have a complex number, we're going to put it in what we call standard form. Where you put the real part first, the A part first, and the imaginary part last. So just quick reminder about imaginary numbers. If we're doing something like this first one is my rule. The square root of -1 is I, period. That's just a rule. It's just a thing that you need to know. The square root of -25 is 5I. The square root of -2 is I times the square root of 2. The square root of -20 is 2I times the square root of 5. You're just simplifying. When you get into things like this is where the complex part comes in, because you have a whole number and you're going to add this thing to it. When I take the square root of -36, I get 6I. So I've got my real part, just my real number, plus my complex number. Complex meaning it's got a real number with an imaginary unit attached to it. If I do 7 minus the square root of -27, because I'm taking the square root of a negative number, this is my imaginary part, and so it's going to be 7 minus 3I times the square root of 3. I just took the square root of -27. The I comes out, and that's going to give me 3 times the square root of 3. So let's practice. 4 plus the square root of -25. The real part is not going to change. It is what it is. It's just 4. And then when I take the square root of -25, the square root of 25 is 5, and the negative part puts the I on my 5. That's the imaginary part, which makes this a complex number. On number 8, if I take the square root of 9, I'm going to get a whole number, a real number. That's 3. And I'm going to subtract the square root of -49. The negative is going to give me an I, and the square root of 49 is 7. This one looks tricky, because where's the negative? It is outside the radical, not inside the radical. So I have -5 plus 7, and that's just going to give me 2. And I did that to make sure, for you to make sure that you are staying on your toes with this, and you're making sure that you know what you're doing, making sure that you've got it covered, okay? That you're not letting something slip by you. So look at number 10 is 8 plus, that negative in here is going to give me an I in my answer. When I take the square root of 63, that's going to give me 3 times the square root of 7. So the imaginary part squeezes in there in the middle, and it's 3I plus the square root of 7. On number 11, I've got 12 plus the square root of -9. So that's going to give me 12 plus 3I. On number 12, I got the square root of -144. So that's going to give me 12I plus the square root of 3. And then we're going to switch it around and put it in standard form. We want the imaginary part last. That's it. You're ready for complex numbers.